The Life Sciences DNA podcast is sponsored by Agilicium Labs, a collaborative space where Agilicium works with its clients to co-develop and incubate POCs, products, and solutions. To learn how Agilicium Labs can use the power of its generative AI for life sciences analytics, visit them at labs.agilicium.com.
Sri, we've got Bijoy Sagar on the show. Who is Bijoy?
Bijoy Sagar is Bayer's Chief Digital and Information Officer. He's been leading a lot of their transformation around AI, data infrastructure, and digital strategies across both pharma and crop sciences.
And for people who may not follow Bayer closely, what should they know about Bayer?
Bayer is one of the largest life sciences companies in the world, spanning pharmaceuticals, consumer health, and agriculture. So when they make moves in AI, it's not theoretical. It affects drug development pipelines, clinical trials, and even global food supply systems.
And what are you hoping to hear from him today?
Bijoy is a practitioner. Over the last 3 decades, he's been part of several digital transformations and industry transformations. He's leading AI initiatives at Bayer and really coming out with a framework on how do you drive innovation at scale, but operationalizing that to make sure that it makes meaningful impact on outcomes. So really looking to have a very good dialogue around how do you start going down the AI journey in a large organization like Bayer, and how do you then come out with the right kind of operating infrastructure to make AI successful.
Well, before we begin, I want to remind our audience that they can stay up on the latest episodes of Life Sciences DNA by hitting the subscribe button. If you enjoy the content, be sure to hit the like button and let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to listen to us on the go by downloading an audio-only version of the show from your preferred podcast platforms. With that, let's welcome Bijoy to the show.
Bijoy, it's so great to have you here on the show. Really, thank you for taking the time.
Great to be here. Thank you, Srivatsan.
Yeah, Bijoy, maybe I'll give your a little bit of a background in 2 parts. Maybe you could talk about your wonderful journey, 30 plus years in the marketplace, but how you transformed yourself as a tech leader. Maybe a quick intro there, and then your role at Bayer and how you're driving a transformation there.
So, mine is an accidental journey. It was not necessarily a planned journey, which I think helps in some ways. I started my career in research and spent some time in development, ended up in sales and marketing for some time, and then arrived in IT through strategy. So I have sort of done the value chain, and I arrived into the tech function just as it was becoming really more important, if you think about it, for the way these domains are working, right? So if you go back to 30 years ago, tech was not central to the business, especially in life science, and it was sort of a necessary evil that happened in the background, and as long as everything worked, I mean, everybody was happy. So my journey has been, to some degree, being able to see how the processes worked in the value chain in life science, and then able to map the tech to that. And if you think about it, Srivatsan, and you've gone through it yourself, we've gone through at least now 3 separate cycles, right? So the world where we sort of led that outsourcing and scale up, and looking at defining what is the role of tech in a company like this, what's essential, what is not essential, to the digital transformation, right? How to put tech in the core of the digital process in the company, and now the AI transformation. And I don't think these are as separate as people would say it is, but they're literally, a wedding cake where one could not have been possible really without the others, right? So I think I've been very lucky to have been around through these transformations, and to some degree, this is, I think, the most important one of those, right? Because the pharma playbook on how we find the right candidates, how we scale them, how we go to market, it hasn't changed in some time. We've been talking about it, but it really hasn't. And what AI is really helping us is to reimagine what that could mean. And this is very timely, given how unmet diseases are looked at, how pharma pricing is going to be and is already very important to the governments and the users. And I think used wisely, AI has a role to play in all of this, finding cures for um, new disease conditions, unmet needs, doing it the right way, and scaling it across multiple populations. So, yeah, that's sort of my journey in a nutshell.
No, it's fantastic. As you said, the journey itself prepared you for the future. And I've been reading some of your key views, and you've been very poignant in saying that AI is a tool, not a magic. And really, you had articulated that you need to solve clear business problems and not technology looking for use case. And so I want to start with that theme because I think that's so poignant for what market is today. It's not a hammer chasing a nail, and you've been very practical about it. So walk me through what are the clear business problems you're attacking as a leader right now, and then how are you making this thing practical?
We are coming to a point where we are thinking, what does an AI-led enterprise mean? Because people use these terms, right? What does that actually mean? And to some degree, what that means is you have to reimagine the workflows um, with AI as the primary sort of mediator, if you will, um, and then look at how do you really create scale with it. So it's not, hey, I have inefficient processes today. I have siloed organizations. I have all of these walls I have built. Let's throw AI on top of it and things would work. So clearly it's not that, right? So it also is not, I have a cool technology here. What do I do with it? So it's not enough to say there is a business problem. You have to really define the business problem at the right level. So one of the things that we are encouraging in the company now, quite at scale, is hey, bring your problems into our innovation center. Let's spend a week talking about what that problem is and why is it a problem. Let's spend some time talking about what solution could solve that problem fundamentally. And then let's go experiment with that solution really fast with AI first, right? So, so it's as much it's about the how as it is about the what, not so much about the tech itself, because I think tech is part of the solution. At least that's how we are thinking about it carefully. Yeah.
And that goes back to your past experience, right? Transformation doesn't happen when you just put a lipstick on a pig or you put the rubber band on this one. Like as you said, siloed processes, siloed organizations, and then start to solve it. You have to fundamentally solve. But with that said, as you're going into those innovation workshops, what kind of are you getting incremental use cases, big bang use cases? I saw you had a framework about like a three-step framework about one is change the business, then the incremental operational process, then also doing things in and around your tech stack. But walk me through how what if I'm outside, how do I bring a use case to you, and how does that work?
So we have, I would say, a top down and bottom up framework, right? The top down is we as a company are very aligned on what are the big goals we want and how we are going to transform. I can't talk about it obviously too much because it's really internal, but I think this is really the core binding strategy. We know what are we going after, we know what we are not going after, and we have a framework. And we have defined a structured frame around that. So who is accountable for the pieces of that framework? What is the role of the board of management? What is the role of tech organization? What's the role of each business function? That I think is the top down constraining factor, right? The bottom up constraining factor is, hey, you have an idea, you have a problem. I don't believe the time has come for us to say, no, 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 it's all going to be centrally mediated. I'm like, you come together and let's solve it. So we built internally what is called an agent builder framework. And that framework is now built into an agentic platform so that everybody in the company follows the same agent builder methodology. And the methodology is tied to how you do it technically. So you can come into our center in Warsaw or Berlin or Bangalore, and you will walk out with a similar process, right? Because I want people to get comfortable with this way of working. So last week we had one of our largest enabling function leaders that went through that in Warsaw. We had one that happened in Bangalore just a couple of weeks before that. On the 11th, we are actually bringing some external leaders outside the company into a hackathon in the same process because we want to understand what is a customer pain point, right? So that's sort of the methodology. Now, what's constraining all of this is the tech stack. So where there is no value in consolidating the tech stack, we have freedom. But as you go deeper into the stack, you have fewer elements of freedom because, yeah, exactly. That's how we have built it. And we are mediating it through these hubs, digital hubs, right? And those hubs are carefully placed in 3 parts of the world so that you can actually bring the right talents and they are closer enough to the business that you want business to be there to co-create. So no throw over the fence method anywhere, right? Nobody gets to sort of say, go build X and then throw it over the fence. You need to come, we need to co-create, we build it.
That's a really useful idea because I've been seeing the success of many of the platforms is exactly that business sponsorship to doing that. Now, you said you brought this enabling function together. Are they big ticket items like I'm HR and I want to transform the recruitment process? Or is it like, okay, let me do my payroll processing in a much more, is it a $1 effect, $10 effect, $1,000 effect? When I say one, dimensionally.
These are big, meaningful cases, right? Uh, if it is really that $1 effect, that's where having that first day of conversation opens a frame, right? Now, I will not say that the $1 questions never happen anywhere. It's a large company, things like that happen, but it's mostly you show up with that. Let's have a dialogue. How do you sort of take that $1 thing, expand so you can see the $1,000 story?
Okay. The big
So in pharma, the one in Bangalore that I just alluded to, I saw these 2 cases we wanted to scale. But the big sort of learning for me was they were essentially 2 parts of the same coin,
Oh, wow.
right? So I'm like, let's bring it together because it's not solving, it looks like it's solving 2 different things, but I think they are going to be building a platform. It's a nascent part of the platform. So that happens as well quite a bit.
Bijoy, are you seeing a lot on as you look at the pharma continuum more in drug discovery stage? Because I know you're fundamentally investing in getting new molecules and target identification. Are you seeing more in clinical development or commercial, or you're seeing a smorgasbord of use cases across the board?
We see all 3, but the opportunities are very different, right? So think about R&D in general. Harder to achieve some of these big things, but the payback is huge. So those conversations are not, hey, listen, let's just come and do some crazy hackathon and you hit the big, payload. So we are thinking about it more deliberately. But go to market, a lot easier to do an agent factory and add incremental value. And we are doing that too. So um, we're not saying no to either one of those, but I think the where the big transformation opportunity is different.
Absolutely. And so as you start to go and build this agent framework, tell us a little bit more about it. What goes into that kit? Is it the tools, the governance, the process? Where have you gotten this playbook done? Is it internally grown? Did you have external help to build this thing out?
No, no, we grew it internally, right?
Okay.
So look, Shivatsan, one of the biggest learnings for us was, and this is the flip side of the earlier learning, right? People were outsourcing, we are
Yeah.
insourcing it all back. And our AI engineers are building these techniques. Because it didn't make sense to go externally for those things because they're cutting across multiple lines and what have you. So yeah, so our young engineers built it. uh, what we have realized is that if you give them the freedom and get out of the way, they always surprise you very positively. And every time I see their work, I am absolutely blown away by their ingenuity, their resilience, the creative way they look at it. Um, so yeah, so obviously, as you know, we are a regulated industry, so ethical way of deploying AI is really core to us. So the governance piece is important, right? Because you can get in trouble in multiple ways. Uh, but we want to transpose away from process to workflow. So to me, a process is vertical, right? We think about a process within a silo. Whatever your silo is, that silo could be a system like ERP. You would say, this is my order to cash process within ERP. Uh, or it could be one area. I am the, you know, regulatory function within pharma. We have a process. We want to get to AI driven workflows. Workflows are horizontal and they lead to an outcome, whatever the outcome is. So you may touch multiple systems along the way. There may be non systems along the way. So that's the big journey we are going through, going from process to workflows and output to outcomes, right? And that's a big journey for a company of our size. We have work to do to get everybody see that potential because there are still going to be silos and this is my boundary. So we need to continue to work through that, but that's sort of the general idea.
So I know you touched upon a critical part, which is this thing about ethics and governance as you start doing it, and you've spoken a lot about that in the market around how important that is. So tell me, what how is the governance? Is there a system governance? Is there a process governance? How do you make this thing work? Because it's quite complicated in this area.
Yeah, so the primary level of governance is a multi function governance, right? Because you have to have legal in the picture, you have regulatory in the picture, you have the tech in the picture, you have multiple people involved to make sure we're not touching something lightly that we shouldn't be. We need to think about, if you're looking at patient data, for example, there are some guardrails that you have to establish and not violate it. Then individual projects, we don't want to create bureaucracy. We just want assessments to see how are you aligned to those guiding principles. And if you then hit a block where you don't know, that's when you sort of raise that, so that if you're doing something that has no touch points to that, go for it, right? You experiment. If you have something, you need to bring it back and we can have a conversation. So that's sort of the our general idea of that governance. So we don't want to create this into a bureaucratic, let's stop everything pathway, but we want people around the table who bring different aspects of it and think through it.
Yeah. You touched upon a very important part, this notion of experimentation and the culture. Do you have a culture of experimentation and fail fast, or is it, you only celebrate victories and stuff, right? Because that's always complicated in this area, right?
So, as you might have seen in Wall Street Journal, Bill Anderson, our CEO, joined about 2 years ago. And he brought in a new management philosophy and a system which we call dynamic shared ownership. And what DSO does is it's allowing small groups of experts empowered to make decisions that drive outcomes in that group. So the AI transformation relies on top of this way of doing work already. So we've dismantled a lot of this bureaucratic, the boss decides type of mentality, right? That's not so. Bill says this, and I love it. He says, you are in a meeting because you bring at least one of these three things, right? Which is expertise, experience, or data. If you're not bringing at least one of these three things, why are you at the meeting?
Yeah,
Right?
makes sense.
And that's a very good framework to think about it. Because of that, and I could go on and on and on about our innovation culture change as a result of this, because it's allowing people to come together and brainstorm, which wouldn't have happened maybe 3 years ago, because somebody would have said, I am HR, or I am radiology, or I am whatever, and this is my problem. And now people are saying, okay, we need to pull one marketing person here, one tech person here, one person from whatever else. Let's transversely solve a problem. Have we solved that problem across the entire company? I would be lying if I told you, yeah. But I'm seeing time and again great results coming out of this mindset. And we want to continue to build on those strengths, right? We want us to fail fast because, if you're looking at these prototypes that we are talking about, ultimately, let's say you have these 5 great ideas in a hackathon, only one is probably going to scale. And even that might pivot 3 times. So you're okay with the other 4 failing because you don't know which of the 5 is going to be the winner. So we're okay with that. And people are getting comfortable with that. We're celebrating the fact that you came, you worked on it, you had a great idea, right? It doesn't mean that your idea will automatically scale. I saw on LinkedIn, I was really touched by this. So Bill and I were in Bangalore in our hub last week, and so many people posted, my engineers and the team, after he left, saying, wow, this is amazing. I've only been in the company for 8 months and I get to present my hackathon idea directly to the CEO. We didn't put any constraints on, no, you can't say this, or we're like, you guys own it. You come together, you tell Bill why you solved that problem, right? And Bill is also encouraging them, not telling him, why are you doing it, or let me put a constraint on it. He is engaging with them. Uh, it's a beautiful story, and I have to tell you, I don't think we could have done this 3 years ago. So I'm a big believer of how we are doing it now.
No, it's fantastic to create that innovation culture, fail fast. Let me come back to the whole agentic AI and this momentum, which is, as you said, a really new momentum. We went through classic AI, we did Gen AI, now agentic AI, and everybody's speaking agentic AI. But as you said, if they don't break the silos, then it's just Gen AI for that particular process. So as you create these multifunctional, I love the word workflow, the horizontal process from process to workflow. How do you select the agents? How do you go about doing this? It's a very complicated structure, or it's not very complicated. How do you first define the workflow and then define what's the tooling you need, and how do you get the agents to work well with?
You start with the outcome, right? So I'll give you an example because this is also from last week, so it's very fresh in my mind. We were in rural Uttar Pradesh because this is the year of female farmer, right? And we want to improve their lives in meaningful ways. And we have the testimonials from these farmers were absolutely mind-blowing, how much their living standards have changed in the last 5 years, how the incomes have tripled and what have you. But one of the things that we have done is we have trained about 6,000 uh, drone operators, female drone operators, which we are calling drone didis. Right? And these drones are AI-enabled drones, and the drones are collecting data off the field, and the drones can actually do the work in 20 minutes, what the farmer was taking 8 hours. Right? Uh, Now we would like to obviously expand this many-fold with the government, with other agencies, because I think the potential is quite high. But the important thing is that's the outcome. The outcome is really how do you change the lives of the farmers? How do you make it real? Um, Not what is the tech stack. Tech stack comes later, right? I mean, so the drone being very much part of the tech stack, but the models are very much part of the tech stack. The LLM that gives people the right answers to their questions is part of the tech stack. Uh, there will be agentic components inserted into the tech stack. So it's not, I will never be the one who's saying, oh yeah, agentic is the cool thing, so that's what we are doing. What I call it internally, multi-tech AI platform, because you pick the right old-fashioned machine learning or deep learning or LLMs or as agents, depending on what's the problem you're trying to solve. Um, Same with pharma, right? If you want to go with a pretty transformative case for the uh, whether you're solving it in the product development side or getting to the patient side, let's define that first, and then the stack will fall under. I think it's a really bad idea to start with the stack.
I totally agree with you. One of the things as you start to build this from process to workflow is data. And we know organizational data, you and me have solved for it. It's been siloed, master data not there, and bad data leads to bad decisions. So how are you thinking about this data continuum across this workflow? And how you, is that a foundational tech stack you have to solve for? Or how are you going about doing that?
It's a foundational layer, not necessarily a tech stack. That was sort of my big aha moment in this journey. Is you can leave the data to some degree where it is. You just have to make it addressable, so you can go find it. So data is not traveling all over the place, right? So which is why building a data mesh is really important. So we know where the data is. What are the rules regarding that data? We also change our foundational rule to need to know to data belongs to the company. You don't need to ask somebody permission to access that data unless there is a real reason from an IP perspective or other regulatory reasons why that data needs to be private. Let's assume all data is public to the employees unless otherwise stipulated. That was not the case before. It was exactly the opposite. All data is private unless we tell you we can open it, right? So it's a fundamentally different way of doing it. So you don't have to get, because if I had tried to build a unified tech stack for data, I'll be here for the next 7 years. Right? It won't happen. So that's why we deliberately went with this model. And the third one is, how do you create the ontology? Right?
Yep.
So the more you are using human-based training of the data, the worse your outcome is. You have to get the humans out of this ontology development and really rely on AI to do the ontology, right? And eliminate as much as possible human tagging and human-based training constraints. You get much better results, especially now with without naming the companies, which of the 2 or 3 companies we are talking about. I am incredibly impressed with that. So that's a third constraint. Uh, I also have an MIT professor who is on our retainer, who is giving us really blunt feedback on what we are not doing well. And it's fantastic, right? Because she is not selling us anything. She is there to sort of say, guys, you're thinking about it the wrong way. This is another way to look at it. This is a better way to look at it. So I think these are the four sort of general rules we have in place. We have a long way to go. So, like I said, again, I will not say that, yeah, we have fully solved this problem across. But if you don't do it this way,
Yeah. No,
you're going to
you
get
you
stuck, right? I mean, look at image data as an example. I'll sort of,
Hmm.
because now image data is becoming so much part of trial submission data, but radiology data is famously badly organized because systems are calibrated differently, their scale is different, not all of that is readily usable. Now, in the past, you had human people going through this data and tagging and creating rules. And I think it resulted in slower and less accurate ways of doing it. Why not let AI figure out how to really process that data? And you get much better general uh, results than if you were to sort of, because how much can you tag, right? It's also a resource constraint, it's a time constraint. We're learning as we go, right? And as I tell our board every time, what I'm telling you now is true as of now. 2 weeks later, it may not be true anymore. And that's true for this podcast too. If you ask me this question 3 weeks from now, I might have a slightly different take on it.
no, but I think what you distilled in the last conversation is actually a very important part, and I want to just go back and re-emphasize that. Classic ML, classic structure classification was always done with human in the middle and human tagging and human cataloging, which has a human variability and error. Now what you're saying is almost you're having AI do the tagging, do the ontology. Of course, the human is going to verify it if they broadly can categorize it in the wrong way, but getting that grunt work and more resilience done, and that wouldn't have happened if without the upgrade of what happened with LLMs and stuff like that. Uh, I've seen you speak about LLMs versus SLMs, and you building your own SLM within Bayer. Is that where you're going with this AI tagging AI by building much more of a small language models to do fit for purpose work?
I mean, our thoughts have evolved a little bit. Yes, SLM is the right answer for so many of the problems, and you know some of them yourself, such as, for example, drug data, submission documents, right? LLMs actually produce more errors than you want. We're also building judge models, which are SLM models, to actually evaluate the output of the LLM models. Because in some ways, that might be a better answer than building a whole SLM. It's use the power of the LLM and then use the SLM judge model to evaluate for what is coming out of that. So both these we are using quite a lot, and I think a version of this is the way to go, uh, because both have their inherent positive things and negative things, right? I mean, SLMs also have, yeah, computationally it's much better to do. You can constrain the output, but they're also constrained by the size, and they don't necessarily think outside the box as much as you inside. So you need sort of a mix of this, and you have to pick the use cases really correctly. So it's not like one is the answer, but yeah, by using general purpose LLMs, especially in our industry, is not going to solve all the problems we want solved.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Uh, Vijay, we could keep continuing to discuss this. What are you, as you said, what you're saying is as we stand right now. But let's take a time travel, and you and me are here in 12 months. What do you think are going to be some big impacts and big changes which is going to happen?
Caveating that I could be wildly wrong. uh, I mean, first of all, I think newer models of transformer theory, RAG and all these new things that are coming out, I think is going to make the output of LLMs much better. And I genuinely think that that is more likely than a full-fledged AGI in 18 months. Even if there is an AGI type thing, but am I going to think that AGI in its sort of mature form in these systems in 18 months? I doubt it, right? But the other big piece is edge cases. I believe that we'll be putting more and more of these cases at the edge, and we have not done enough, right? So frontier models are coming up, and this orchestration is becoming a lot easier. So you're going to see a lot more agent embedding. That would be great. The reinforcement learning is going to make the answers better, but the application of that, I think, is a lot going to be on the edge. So yeah, 18 months, if I can get those two things, I would be quite happy, right? And inference time compute is going to be important because, look, at some point we will have to change the cost basis for the compute. It's all okay now. I still remind everybody it's still early days, and we, unfortunately, are pretty lazy with our compute today. And I don't think I'm only talking about Bayer. I think across the board, with graph, RAG, RAG models and multi-hop RAG models, we are still pretty lazy.
Yep.
I think in 18 months, I hope we get tighter with compute. This sort of mixture of experts RAG model is going to be the sort of way we would do the dynamic retrieval, because if you don't get the unit cost down, the scale is going to be impossible.
Yep. No, spot on. And is physical AI at all in your 18 months horizon, or that's not yet there?
What do you mean physical AI? Because that's a very
Where robotics and where now a lot of things are
yeah. So I mean,
coming
look,
more to it.
we
Yeah.
will look at robotics, especially in manufacturing. We are already looking at some pilots there. But again, let's be absolutely honest with it, right? Force modulation among robotics is still not mature. And widespread application of NLP-based robotic processing would require force modulation to get to the next level. Now, that could happen in 3 weeks, like we keep saying, right? But today, it's not there yet. We'll continue to learn, we'll continue to do that where it makes sense. But anybody who tells us that in robots going to be everywhere before force modulation is fully solved, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm slightly skeptical of that claim.
No, no, no. I spot on. But Bijay, this has been a fascinating discussion. I think some really key insights on the whole outcome-based model, breaking up process to a workflow, and really building it from a business perspective. So, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it, and look forward to having this conversation again in 12 months to see where we are.
Indeed. No, my pleasure. If I may add one last thought, because we didn't go into it, it is really, this is not about the tech. So, anybody like me, like you, the big conversation I think we should be talking about is how do we bring the organization along? Whether it's a management, whether it's our employees, whether it's mid-level management, the tech will keep up. The tech will do quite amazing things, but the tech is moving too fast for us to really think about this carefully as big organizations, right? So to me, since you didn't go into it, but I wanted to sort of throw that as well, is none of these discussions are complete without that piece. How do we bring everybody together and craft a solution? And it's not an IT thing. AI is a general purpose technology. The entire company is going to have to come together. And if you think about it as just IT or tech or whatever, I think you're going to leave quite a lot on the table. So I just want to sort of add
No,
that
no,
as
no.
well.
There are always two questions I ask, which I didn't get to you. One was the change management aspect of how do you bring organizations together, and the second is the talent upgrade, because this is not natural for people to do that. And maybe those are two good things. Maybe some thoughts around that, because those are pretty important topics on change and talent
Yeah.
upgrade.
I mean, the change, there's no magic here, right? We are spending quite a lot of time co-creating with the board of management, with other levels of management. We are taking them on trips. We are actually inviting them to do hackathons. There is a lot of conversations where it's not even internal. You have to sort of blow it open and let people see, um, and all levels, right? So that's change management in my book, because you can't sort of do a couple of PowerPoints and think that people get it. That's not how it works. Um, Skilling is something I don't think I have fully solved yet. Um, and and you can look at it into three categories, right? Or four categories. There is going to be a small group of people who will have to get very comfortable with meta model level. How do these agentic transformation work as a meta model for the whole company? It's not a lot of people, but some people have to get super good at that, right? Then you need a layer of people who have to get really good at how do you design these agents? How do you solve this problem for the company? Rethink this. And the third layer is the people who have to get comfortable working with the agents, working with AI side by side. I don't think the knowledge and skill building is the same for all
Yeah,
three
it's different.
layers.
Yeah.
It's very different. So we are working through that. But we are also asking questions like, what is the work of the future? What is the employee of the future? What are essential skills for a leader of the future? Um, would I say we know all the answers yet? No. But we are at least asking those questions because we want to bring the organization along. Right? I keep telling people no company can hire your way out of this problem. You have to internally skill people and bring them along. Uh, but it'll be a mistake to think that all levels have the same fluency.
Yeah.
I don't think that's realistic either.
But given each of those different categories, is that a particular EQ you're looking at in a person? What differentiates the person who's going to be in this journey versus the ostriches who are going to say, "I'm my head in the sand and this is not going to pass by"?
Look, I've always said that what makes somebody successful in this world, even before AI, uh, is comfort with ambiguity and high intellectual curiosity. Right? That those are two skills without which you can be successful today. I would propose that a high performer of tomorrow is a high performer because they are able to leverage these technologies to create superlative output. That's what high performance of tomorrow is. Are we there yet? Probably not, right? But at least this is my working hypothesis of what high performance means tomorrow. It's not that you alone, it's you plus all these things available to you creating the best output.
In that kind of high intellectual activity, one of the things I build is resilience, because you have to fail and then get yourself back again and saying, no problem, I learned from it and I move on. And that scientific experimentation mindset, some people have it because they've done that. It's 99% you fail for the 100th%
Yeah.
success. But not many have that resilience. And so then people sometimes give up or say this doesn't work. And so that's also a very big skill set
Yeah.
I think is needed in the
Absolutely.
market.
I mean, especially this goes to prompt engineering, right? Very few people treat prompt engineering as a conversation.
Yeah.
They think of it as like Google. I ask a
Search.
question, I should get an answer, and then I say, oh, this is rubbish. This is not the right answer. No, you don't ask a question. This is really a conversation. You're essentially working with an intern. You're working with a junior level employee, and it's a two-way conversation. So, I mean, I work every weekend with these models. I'm coding again, right? And I'm learning all of this stuff. And at the end of each exercise, I have an evaluation exercise with the model. How did I do? Right? Did I ask the right questions? What comes? And it gives me decent feedback on, do I like all that feedback? No, but it's part of the journey, you know. So I encourage everybody to do that because the good news, Srivatsan, is none of us are experts in this.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. No, no.
uh,
We're all learning. And that's the other thing, the learning mindset, right? Like you said, learning and experimentation
yes,
is a critical part of that EQ, in addition to, as you said, intellectual curiosity and
yeah.
ability to deal with ambiguity. Bijoy, this has been a fascinating conversation. I know it's already time, but really, really appreciate it. Thank you for
No,
taking the time. This has been super useful and really appreciate it.
no, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Appreciate that.
Well, that was something to hear, Bijoy. What did you think?
It was so fascinating. I think there was some really key takeaways, but the most critical thing was, hey, when you start to think about AI and all the transformation journeys, first start with the outcomes. Do not think about output. So the first model he said is, how do you go from output to outcomes? And the second part he said is that as you go from output to outcomes, don't think process, which is siloed ways in which to doing it. Think about workflow. How does this workflow make sure that that impacts the outcomes? Then decide around, once you know what workflow you're going to implement, what kind of technologies, infrastructure, and solutions you do to make sure that this happens in the right way. So it was a really very good framework which all of us can adapt on. How do you implement AI at scale?
You asked about how much of a culture of experimentation they have, and he talked about a management philosophy of dynamic shared ownership, which empowers small groups to shred bureaucratic top-down decision making. What does that mean for something like the implementation of AI?
As he said, when you go from a process to a workflow, you really need to make sure that those teams are empowered to work together to get the outcomes. Typical organizations make sure that each of their processes are optimized, and then it's a handover or throw over the wall to the next group to go and get work done. By looking at a workflow together, you can then really think about problem solving. To do that, you do need these dynamic organizations and a dynamic ownership, because if without that, you're going to make sure that things get either lost in translation or the ball gets dropped. So is it really, you have to have the right management culture, but then you use the management culture to make the right impact and change.
He also talked about this fascinating use case of the women farm workers in India that he referred to as the drone ladies. And this was an example of starting with outcomes rather than the tech stack. What did you think that is a philosophic approach to implementing AI?
I think that was really putting the outcomes in play. He wanted to make sure that the ladies were empowered to make the right decisions, and a drone could do work which a farmer would do in 8 hours in 20 minutes. And making them drone operators, the outcome was defined that you wanted to improve the yield and throughput of what crops they're getting, and making sure that they can economically be better off. And once you start to saying that that's the outcome you want to impact, then the technology like drones and AI models to figure out what the topography is, and then to figure out what needs to be done in terms of pesticide applications, all become subcomponents of that outcome enabling journey. But what was very fulfilling is at the end of the day, each of the women were 3 times economically better. They were very empowered, and they were making a better life for themselves and their kids. And so this has been really an impactful and a transformational journey on what AI can do to make lives be better.
You also asked about small language models versus large language models, SLMs versus LLMs. These are small language models are optimized to a specific task. I don't think we've talked about these on the show before. For listeners not familiar with these, can you explain the benefits and what these are getting used to do?
Think about large language models as the wide encyclopedia repository of everything which is going on in the market. And look at SLMs, or small language models, are fit for purpose models which are very tuned to what you need specifically to your domain, whether it's the type of drug diseases you're dealing with, or the kind of medical coding components you need. So these are very specific in language and ontology to what you need. What Bijoy said was a really fascinating application of LLMs. So most people, when you start to apply LLMs, it becomes compute-wise very costly, because you're recreating a smaller version of an LLM, which requires high compute devices. You need the NVIDIA chips, and you need all of these infrastructure. And therefore, you have to balance out the cost of building an SLM versus what you would do to just use an LLM and fine-tune that. What he was saying is that rather than use the SLM to do all the work off of an LLM, he uses that as a judge, which means the LLM does all of the heavy work. The SLM is actually acting as a judge to make sure that it is contextually right, domain-wise right, ontologically right. So it was a very good use of how you can pair LLMs and SLMs together. And as he said, it's not one versus the other. It's one complementing each other to make for better outcomes.
It was a great conversation. It really gave some insights into how a large organization like Bayer is not only implementing, but thinking about AI. Sri, thanks as always.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks again to our sponsor, Agilicium Labs. Life Sciences DNA is a bi-monthly podcast produced by the Levine Media Group, with production support from Fullview Media. Be sure to follow us on your preferred podcast platform. Music for this podcast is provided courtesy of the Jonah Levine Collective. We'd love to hear from you. Pop us a note at danny@levinemediagroup.com. For Life Sciences DNA, I'm Daniel Levine. Thanks for joining us.